You can't judge a book by its cover, but you can judge an artist by his art. The adage, you can't judge a book by its cover, still rings true even today. But I say, you can judge an artist by his art. That any artwork an artist creates is something I think you can judge him or her by. You can even apply this principle theory even with Renaissance masters. If you presented some people with early art done by them, and not knowing it's them, their reaction would be that these works are amateurish or not yet fleshed out. Because these masters were indeed amateurs at one point, and when someone reveals the amateur work of Rembrandt or Da Vinci, well, it still won't change the theory of being able to judge an artist by his art. Because masters, as they will come to be, indeed are still amateurs with the artwork presented as early works. If anything, it preserved their skill level at that time. Sure, it's still valuable as fuck, but not because of skill, because it belonged to Rembrandt and Da Vinci, and we're not talking about monetary value, we're talking about the state of the artist, as he or she made his art. One's art is a snapshot of one's skill level at the time he made it, no excuses. One's art, whenever it is made, is more reflective than a mirror, at least to one's skill. You really can't fake being a master in a technique, nor could you also fake that you aren't a splendid craftsman in your craft. Even if an artist, out of spite, wants to prove this theory wrong, and he's already a well-known artist, and then he does a painting intentionally, or unintentionally, haphazardly, and has a half-baked concept, then shows said artwork to me without me knowing who the artist is, and I judge it, and then I say that the art by itself is poorly made, and go as far as criticizing the artist as being immature art-wise, but I would note that their stroke is confident, and concept is either not fully fleshed out, or he's just tripping. And then afterwards they reveal themselves as being a well-known artist all along. I can still say that even if he or she revealed himself, that his art was still raw in terms of execution or concept, because, first, they made it out of spite. His intentions will come out of his concept, his strokes will not be as firmly done. And second, if he or she had even had the time to do it, holding back his true skills, it would come across in the artwork too. Revealing that the artist is indeed holding back just to prove a point, art that is held back, hence you can indeed judge the artist by his or her art. Or if he did the opposite, if he or she gave it his or her all, we can judge the artist as a skillful painter already. There's always a tell, one can read brushstrokes like reading a book. Your work will exude excellence if you're a legend at it, and it will also stink of your lack of talent or skill in practice, which most people can see. Maybe not every time, but there's an aura to it that people can't explain. But the ones who do know what to look for see it. Mostly, it's not even meant to come out. Some artists don't know their skill level, and he just does it fluently, or sometimes ineffectively, and does a stroke. Some have truly perfected their technique time and time again, and they no longer think about it. It's what the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu meant when he said, doing without doing. You are no longer aware you are doing something because you aren't thinking about doing it, you are just doing it. You have mastered it, it is part of you. It may not have been a part of you before, but when one perseveres, when one keeps at it, you can no longer not do it. Amateurs practice until they get it right, professionals practice until they can't get it wrong, as they say. It's like being in the zone, and the more you practice, the longer you can stay in the zone. Now imagine if you could do that with your art every time you paint, would you do it otherwise? There's also another saying that comes to mind when discussing this, which is a saying I don't believe in and hate with a passion: fake it until you make it. You really can't make it if you're always faking it. Instead of faking it, why not make it real? Practice why don't you until you can do it, don't just act like it, be the part. Like Leonardo DiCaprio's character Franco Bagnell when he was faking being a doctor in the movie Catch Me If You Can. He can't operate on a person like a surgeon, he can only mimic what the doctors in movies say, and try to pass off as a doctor or pilot. Unless he studies for it and practices, he's surely become a doctor and pilot. And speaking of actors, fake it until you make it is for amateur actors only. They fake an expression and fake that they're shooting a basketball with a role they're playing. But there's this thing called method acting, which is really doing it. Some actors, if they'll be portraying a janitor, would secretly be a janitor for a week or month, just to know how it feels to be one. They would also talk to people in the profession and ask their experience and apply it in their acting. There's more authenticity behind it, and even if you don't go all method with your acting, the best actors and actresses may have a role to play, but when it's time to cry, they pull deep within them and experience that they did feel that sadness or loneliness they felt. They're able to express anger when they go back to their memories of being betrayed or furious. And when they laugh on screen, it's not a fake laugh, they're really having fun. So actresses and actors aren't fakers, they're real people who are emoting on screen with real emotions. The phony actors and actresses, well, you can see that a mile away. Even if you aren't a cinema connoisseur or movie buff, heck, you don't even need to have been to acting school to spot these fakers on the TV or on the big screen. Just watch Gal Gadot act in her Wonder Woman roles. Sure, she looks pretty as hell, she really looks like Wonder Woman in the costume. But man, when she opens her mouth and says lines, fucking cringe city. And God forbid if you saw her singing. She's still hot though. But compare her acting to Elizabeth Olsen's Wanda Maximoff. Even if you didn't really know who the Scarlet Witch is in the comics, if you've seen her act in any Avengers films, or if you've watched WandaVision, you can see that she's a great actress, not because she's wearing the costume, she's Wanda, even if she's just wearing sweatpants, because she has embodied her character of being a wife and a mother. And when you do see her in costume, it is as if the character from the comics has stepped out from the page. She's a real goddess to behold. You feel her pain when she cries, and you're happy for her when you see her have fun with her kids and husband, even if he's a synthezoid. That's acting, that's real acting, or that's real. Now watch Gal Gadot's speech about perfection at the end of Wonder Woman 1984. Man, even the script is empty platitudes and bad acting. That's a real faker. Now Gal might have gone to more acting classes by now, and she might have improved her acting in her recent films, which I will give credit to her when I do see them. But for now, I don't know and I don't intend to find out, just so I can be spared from the disappointment and not waste my time. The point I'm making here is if you've got the chops for the role, if you got talent or skill, or if you have really put your heart, soul, and mind into an artwork, it will show. And you might have been doing that for your art for quite some time now, and you've been posting it on social media, and it only gets less than 5 likes every time you do. Don't worry, it'll pick up soon. Because great art, something really great, people don't sleep on it for too long. The only thing you should work on is your patience in getting noticed. And I also would propose that you should at least try to improve or at least have a strategy to get more eyeballs on your work. But ultimately, you also might want to consider if your work is really the shit or just plain shit. And since I don't know you personally, I'm going to have to say the only way you'll know is, you really can't know. But the only thing you can do is keep improving and never getting satisfied with what you have already done. Don't rest on your laurels and keep improving and escalating your work for the better. That's the only surefire way I know how you'll know you're doing better. Because you're keeping at it and not getting stuck with this one art project you've done and calling yourself a genius in your head. But in reality, no one really cares about your art because it's too obscure. It might be that you are a genius, but if you don't put your art out there, if you are listening to good criticisms or at least trying out suggestions if they're good for you, then I can bet you aren't growing. You can't improve your work when you, yourself, can't improve your mindset or even your attitude. Why show your art out there in the first place when you aren't interested to hear what people think? Why make art and show it to people if you're not going to care about how they react to it? Just keep it in your head. The truth is, even if we say we don't care what people think of our art, we actually do, because when we put it out there, we would often check and see what others think of it no matter what, even for a tiny bit. And it might not get the traction or attention you think it might deserve, and you might hate or bitch about that. But the truth is, it's only because you didn't put it in front of many people to see, which I suggest you do, and maybe that's why it's not getting as much attention and recognition. And that's not the only reason. It may be because they don't understand your work. Maybe you should at least make more effort for people to understand it more, so you need to keep improving your art. I've run into a lot of people who don't want to tweak their art, so that it would be more understandable to other people for others to get what they're talking about or saying. They would often say, "That's not me," or "I don't want to compromise my expression just so people would get me." Well, okay then, they won't get you. Stay stuck in obscurity then. The best artworks are those that have a deep meaning expressed by the idea of the artist that can still be understood by the passerby. Damien Hirst's artwork installation, 1,000 Years, it's a fish tank with a rotting cow's head in it, where there are maggots hatching flies, and said flies are lured into a bug zapper installed along with all of these things in the fish tank. Meaning. Death, life, and death and life. It's all been going on for 1,000 years or more. It's a deep and thought-provoking artwork. Controversial at the time of its unveiling, wonderful, beautiful, and morbidly chaotic. It's powerful to look at, and you can't keep your eyes on it, but at the same time, you can't look away. Even the smell punches you in the face. Damien says, "It's a pretty deep artwork. It conveys what the artist wants to tell. Who even can tell he wanted to tell something in the first place? But what's important is that it gives meaning, and we can understand what he's trying to tell, even if it's not an accurate grasp of the message. At least we're able to grasp something. And that should be the main goal of your art. Make it possible for your audience to read your work, even if it's not the language they speak. True art will reveal its meaning to the viewer if done right. People do judge people on their outside appearance, even if the adage says that we shouldn't, there's some truth to it. I know when I ride a jeepney in Blumentritt and some shady guy is frantically looking like he's on the run or he's hyped up in meth, and he's eyeballing the cell phone of one who is absent-mindedly flaunting it, especially if the one holding the phone is a weakling rich kid who's new to Blumentritt. There are body languages one can tell what one's true intentions are, and it goes both ways. Either you're going to fight or you're going to run away from an intense situation. That's why people have a poker face. There are also tells in one's words, which are subtle enough that the police can tell if their suspect is telling the truth or not. We all make unconscious movements and say words that give out who we are, even if we try to hide them, some people can sense it. Now imagine that in your artwork where you're bearing your soul. People can tell if you've researched something well enough with the details you're putting into your painting. Especially if it's a specific subject, and you're just winging it, and you truly don't know what the hell you're talking about. And in executing your art, the strokes you make show confidence. At the same time, they also show the immaturity of having unsure layers and lines. There is indeed room for mistakes in art, but most experts and collectors can identify when the artist is second-guessing himself, or if he's having fun playing with the colors if it's an intentional mistake. They can tell that the artist doesn't mind the beautiful or random outcome that shows up unplanned in his work. When I look at an artwork, most of the time, I already know who that artist is inspired by, or where he copied that technique or style, or concept from. I may not know everything, but I've seen a lot. And I do mean a lot, lots of art, comics, films, TV shows, and a whole lot of images in the internet and books to know where you got that thing on your painting, or who artist you're inspired by, or which movement you're trying to create from. You can easily tell if a painting is a cubism or realism, or dark the way H.R. Giger or Hieronymus Bosch does stuff, so it's easier to determine if the artist also is just trying to copy that other famous artist's style, and he silently prays that no one will know he copied it. And that kind of attitude is what makes me laugh. Of course, people will know, maybe not everyone will, but people who know stuff will know, especially if you're copying from is quite famous. A better thing to do is to know the difference between imitation and inspiration. It is better to be inspired by something than to wholesale copy what the other artist did. With inspiration, you can let your audience know you're inspired by this artist when you made this series or style, and that you have added something your own into that style. Eventually, people would feel much happier because they know you aren't trying to trick them into passing off something as your own, and eventually you as an artist would find your own style by adding more of yourself in each piece you make going forward. It's also not just about art styles, it's also about the story or concept you have with your art that shows you are as an artist. I can always tell when someone ran out of ideas when seeing their work, or if they've run out of energy and momentum while painting. Most of the time the reason I can see in the strokes that the artist didn't put much effort into painting their pieces, they either lacked time to do it or lacked the effort to paint it, because they were bored with their own work as a result of they aren't aroused by their idea, and just needed something to submit for a show they have agreed to participate in. You can see these kinds of paintings on group shows, and I only know the bad habit because I have been one of these people before. I lack time, even if my artwork had a good concept, and I failed to give it my all, because I didn't plan my schedule well, or I took too much time doing other things that I neglected to have the discipline to finish the artwork ahead of time. As I said, you can judge the artist by his art, and since I wasn't able to finish on time with the best of what I had in me, it meant that I don't know how to manage my time as an artist, and I didn't have the discipline to not submit a half-baked artwork altogether when I know it sucks. And when you exhibit something at a gallery, it's there, forever, sealed in time, it's on your record. In your mind and memory, even if no one really remembers these works of yours, although some might, that's really something you can't change. The only thing you can do is to make better artwork going forward and learn from that lesson of showing half-baked work. Or pull it out of the wall, either destroying it or retouching it for another show to come. It's your call, because it's your art and reputation. You can't judge a book, but you can judge an artist by their art. Not a lot of artists like to hear this quote of mine, but it rings true to those who really give it their all on their works, to which I say to them, keep at it. And to those who haphazardly copy, or make art with little effort, mimic story, or parrot a message, I say to you, we know. Even if not everyone knows, we know. Some of us can see it in your art, no matter how much you try to hide it. Because whether you make good or bad art, you are what you paint.